Here we have a shower faucet, shower knob that is used to go from cold water to hot water from right to left or counterclockwise. And so normally you would have it start from cold with zero pressure, and then once you turn towards the left, it'll start to increase the pressure with mostly cold water. Once it's near maximum flow, it should start to mix with the hot water, come warm, and then so on all the way to complete hot. However, on this house, whoever installed the plumbing originally, they swapped the hot cold, so now it starts off hot and then ends up cold, which is not exactly what you'd expect based on the label. So what we're going to do is relatively easy if you have just a few regular tools, plus this is critical as well to have, and then just a screwdriver, maybe like a screw or a fork with a sharp tip that can be used to remove this little cover. And you may also need, you would also need either an adjustable wrench, a larger one, or a T, which is used to turn off the water main valve to the entire house, typically in the front yard, but sometimes found in the basement as well. And that's very critical to make sure you don't have any high water pressure, typically 60 or 80 psi of water shooting straight out, and you'll most likely start to panic and cause water damage, especially if you're in the top floor. So be sure to shut off the water main first, and then in order to test that you've done so properly, I would go to one of the, let's say the kitchen sink, turn on the cold water, and you should see that the water pressure is drastically reduced, and it should go down to almost a drip, depending on how much water is remaining in the upper floors that might be coming back down with gravity and whatnot. But that will reduce the water coming out here once you remove the cartridge down to maybe like a very small stream, or maybe even dripping ideally. That way you don't have water spraying out towards your face and maybe losing some parts in the process. So once you have the water off and tested, you can take something sharp like this screw, or maybe even the leads on a multimeter. It has basically the shape of a nail at the end, or a fork, and just stick it into a notch on this side, and typically a notch on the other side. And you can go back and forth a little bit to get the cover to come off, and hopefully be able to remove it by hand. Okay, so I place the parts to the side, and I've already loosened up some of these parts to make it easier to record it, but this is quite easy right here. It's not too tight. Just use a Phillips screwdriver, and that will allow you to slide the knob off quite easily. Okay. Now what we see is the hard stop for the hot water. If it's plumbed correctly, then it will tell you when the knob will stop rotating to the left, counterclockwise, and that will determine the maximum hot water temperature that you have flowing out the shower, which is important for if you have children who might scald themselves, or if your hot water heater is adjusted higher than the recommended temperature. And in order to adjust that, you can pull this out, maybe move 1 or 2 notches to the left, try out the new temperature, and that's in order to increase the temperature. And if you want to cool it down for safety reasons, you can turn it 1 or 2 knobs to the right. Typically, if you are doing a new installation, you may need to adjust to the left a couple notches, but that's going to depend on your application. So just try it out and test it out first before you let everyone start using it. And then behind that, in this model, this is Delta. You can see Delta. There is a O-ring that is keeping this brass part on. So you can again use a fork carefully, or use your nails to pry or roll the O-ring out towards the front and leave it to the side. So that should allow this piece to slide off, and only goes in essentially one way. It may go the other way, but then you can tell that this marker is not going to be up and to the right. It would be opposite direction, which would not work correctly. Okay, and now we have this cover. This is just a kind of a vanity cover. It's held in with some O-ring seal, so just give a nice tug in case there's some buildup around here that's causing it to stick. But just kind of give it a good tug, and that should come off as well. And then you can see that this has been here a while. There's some hard water stains, maybe some drywall, and some glues and whatnot. So it's going to have some stickiness when trying to remove this collar. This collar is brass, and so is the part that's attached to. So it's somewhat strong, and so I wouldn't worry too much about galling the threads. As long as you have the these wide pliers, very, very helpful for something like this. You can open it up. Let me open up some more. Once you have it opened up enough, just get a nice grip on there and turn it to the left, counterclockwise, just like most screws and bolts. Give it a nice tug. This one's already been loosened up, so it's going to be easier for me to do on the camera. If you don't get good grip, you can also flip the plier around to use it more properly, give a better grip, going counterclockwise. Okay. Try not to slip, because then you'll be putting scratches into, some deep scratches into the collar. Once it's relatively loose, you should be able to do it by hand. It's only a few turns because the threads is maybe about four threads. Okay. At this point, we have a very good view of the cartridge, and so I'm going to use the same pliers, but maybe make it a little smaller this time. That way it fits correctly. Okay. I'm not going to squeeze too hard because this is plastic and we don't want to damage it. I'm just going to squeeze just enough so that we have a nice good grip of it. And you see on the side, there is a little arrow right there. Okay. That's going to kind of help position it once you reinstall it. But we're going to remove it and flip it 180 and push it back in. In order to get it out, this will stick quite a bit because of the O-ring seal inside and it being used for a long time, a lot of buildup. But this triangle is also going to help us remove it by rotating this cartridge left and right, counterclockwise and clockwise, over and over a little bit. This arrow is going to help push it out as well, and kind of watch the arrow while I'm doing it. So if I'm doing this up a little bit, it starts to push it out. If I do it right a little bit, pushes it out. Left a little bit, it'll push it out more, and right, it should push that all the way. And as you can see, some of the remaining water will drip out, but very little. This is a little bit easier than it was when I initially did it, of course, but just several more times of left and right will typically loosen it up and allow you to pull it off. There you go. And that's what the cartridge looks like. You can see there are 3 O-rings, 2 of the smaller ones for the hot and cold, and 1 larger one. At this time you can inspect the O-rings, and if you like you can replace it, or you can just, if it's still working, don't mess with it, replace it later if you have an issue. But at this point it would obviously be easy to replace these O-rings. You would just have to find the O-rings at Home Depot or Harbor Freight or somewhere. Okay, so we're going to rotate it 180. So I'm going to do that really quick. Okay, so that is roughly 180. And I'm going to push it back in. This time we won't need the pliers, so I'm going to put that away. Let's put that on the ground. Okay. And as you notice, this piece is now to the left instead of to the right, so we flipped it 180. And there are 2 arrows, 1 on each side, 2 triangles. You're going to want to kind of carefully, slowly push it in so that you don't damage the O-ring too much. Ideally, I would probably add some silicone grease here to help it slide and not get caught. But you are also pushing in the 2 cartridge smaller O-rings at the same time, so that can also get caught. There you go. Once it gets to the right position, it kind of pops in, and then make sure it goes all the way in. There you go, snug. Now we just reassembled everything, which should be relatively straightforward. Okay, so off camera I used my little steel brush to clean a couple of the visible parts. The brass piece, small brass piece. Because our knob is a clear plastic, I wanted to clean up the top just a little bit so it doesn't look too janky. And then wipe down this little cover a little bit more. Couldn't use running water because our main water valve is still turned off. So now we're going to go ahead and reassemble. The most important bit is going to be this piece. If you don't have this one on and you turn on your water valve again in the front yard, then this will shoot straight out and you may damage your house with water. Okay, so you're going to want to start this by hand. Make sure it turns about 4 times, depending on how many threads you have. Make sure it's nice and snug, so you can see that right on the inside it should be touching the plastic. And then we're going to use the same wide pliers. Let me readjust it again. Okay, and then this time flip the pliers around so you have the white going clockwise. It doesn't have to be super tight, but I would give it maybe like 10 pounds of force just to make sure it's snug and this isn't coming out. But the watertight seal is mainly from that large O-ring that we saw in the cartridge, so I wouldn't worry too much about cranking it down. Okay, so we're done with the large pliers, and now we just have the small remaining parts and the vanity cover and knob. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this piece on. I'm just going to have the residue facing the bottom. That was hard to remove so that we don't see it every day. And then, in order, I'm going to place the brass piece again. Now it's going to face down to the left instead of up and to the right like originally. And this little O-ring, which keeps that piece from sliding out. Okay. And then we have this adjuster. We're going to have this major mark right here correspond to this mark right here. And that's kind of the default setting, which we can adjust later on, but we can do that without having to shut off the water main again. So because the cartridge is still going to be intact, all you would have to do to adjust the hot water temperature at this point is just to take this out, slide it 1 or 2 notches to the right or to the left in order to increase the temperature, and to the right in order to decrease the temperature a little bit. But for now, since I don't know exactly where it's going to be, I'm going to have it right on the default. And then the knob goes on next. It can go on in 1 of 2 positions, but it really doesn't matter which one you use. And just snug down the screw. It's not going to really loosen up too much because it's under tension from the plastic and rubber pieces. And then you have your cover piece, which, assuming the valve is all the way closed, you would most likely want your Delta logo nice and straight. In this case, the arrow will be pointing to the right for full coat. Okay. And that is it. Make sure you don't have any remaining parts that need to be installed. And then you should be good to go to turn on the water valve, water main outside. Thanks for watching. My little helper. He doesn't even know he's my helper. His name is Baby. He loves to pull stuff from my tool bag.